Hello everyone, I'm Angeline.
And I'm Sam.
We're so glad you could join us today at English Digest. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a topic that education ministers, teachers, parents, and even students have probably debated for ages. Our writing topic today addresses the pros and cons of single-sex high schools. So did you attend a same-sex school in Taiwan or when you were growing up?
When I was in high school, I went to Songshan Senior High School. It's not a same-sex school because I wasn't good enough to get in those same-sex schools.
Good enough. So does that mean that same-sex schools are for those top students in Taiwan?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, like the best ones, especially when it's like senior high school. Yeah, because you have to take a test and use that score to apply for
a high school. So you have this, it's not just in university that you guys have to do this. You have to do this in middle school.
Yeah, but
where
it's
you take
like,
a test.
Yes. It's like less complicated.
Less complicated.
Yeah, but still. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's a little bit different from how I went to school in Canada. We basically went to the high school that was closest to our house.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we don't have like a selection process and there's no test to get into the school. You only get to go to the school that is within your zone, your area, your neighborhood, So depending on where you live, that's the specific school that you have to go to.
Okay, so it's pretty much like elementary school or
is
junior high school.
Is that how elementary school
in Taiwan,
is for you guys? Okay, yeah. So for you guys in high school, it sounds like your university career sounds like it starts in high school already. And for single-sex high schools in Taiwan, you have to be, as Sam says, good enough, which means you have to have very good grades.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into how to write an argumentative essay on this topic. What does our writing prompt say, Sam?
好，我马上来看一下今天的这个文章提示。今天就来要讨论一下这个单性别学校比较好，还是男女合校比较好哦。提示说呢，台湾的高中除了男女合校，还有单一性别学校。而是否实行单一性别学校呢，一直都存在着许多支持与反对的声浪。今天呢，就要就这个主题写一篇英文作文，文长至少要120个单词，文章要分两段。第一段呢，要说明这个单一性别学校的优点，那第二段呢，我们就要来说明这个它的缺点，然后记得呢，最后下结论的时候要提出自己的看法并作结。
Okay, our writing prompt says, aside from co-ed high schools, Taiwan also offers single-sex schools. The debate about whether to implement single-sex schools has been ongoing. So write an essay with at least 120 words discussing the pros and cons of single-sex schools. The essay should be divided into 2 paragraphs. In the first paragraph, explain the advantages of single-sex schools. In the second paragraph, explain the disadvantages of these schools. Then conclude the essay with your opinion on the matter. Okay, so sometimes you might hear people refer to single-sex schools as same-sex schools or even girls' schools or boys' schools. Do you guys call it girls' schools or boys' schools here?
Yes,
like in English, it might say Songshan Girls High School or something like that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, like single-sex school, if we translate it into Chinese, it'd be like 单一性别学校. It's actually kind of confusing for me.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so same sex would be a more accurate way to describe it.
Yeah, like girls' school or boys' school. That's,
girls' school or boys'
even
school.
easier.
Okay. So in Canada, publicly funded schools offering single-sex schools are relatively rare. That means public schools don't usually have single-sex schools. It's not very common. If you want to go to an all-girls school or all-boys school, it's usually a private school that you have to go to in Canada. I went to public school my whole life, and also because of what I told you earlier, we basically go to schools based on where we live.
Yes.
And all of those public schools were all co-ed. So, girls' schools and boys' schools just seemed very, very foreign to me. The idea of going to school with all girls just is so hard to imagine, actually, for me. I don't know if that's true for you. It is so weird. I actually think my life would turn out differently if I went to a same-sex school.
Really?
Yeah. Like,
how
would it be different? Okay, well, first of all, it would be really hard to meet people of the opposite sex, I think. My friends were made up of the people I went to school with. So I wouldn't have any guy friends. I wouldn't have any
okay.
male friends if I went to an all-girls school.
Okay.
Also because like my parents were pretty strict, so I wasn't really allowed to go out and socialize,
Yes.
go to parties or whatever. So I really wouldn't know any guys, right?
Yes,
I would only know
yes.
what is within my own school. So it would be really hard for me to date or whatever. Yeah, that's what I think. It would be very difficult if I went to a same-sex school. And I think I probably would be a little bit awkward. I wouldn't know how to talk to the opposite sex.
Really?
I think so because just think about if you went to a single-sex school in high school.
Yeah.
That's when you start mingling with the opposite sex, right? Like for me in elementary school, you don't really talk to the boys had cooties, you know? You don't talk to the boys. And then in middle school, that was kind of the time when you kind of started to have some crushes, you know? You would start liking the opposite sex, but maybe you wouldn't feel so comfortable talking to them yet. And that's in high school is when
high school
you
is
really,
the time.
Yeah, like when you really have guy friends or when you have a boyfriend, that kind of thing. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because I wasn't good enough to go to a
To
boys'
a boys' school,
yeah. So yeah, what I had is like mixed gender. So for me, it's like really, I don't know, it comes natural to me for me to like talk to guys, to girls, to
but if you were only going to a boys' school, how do you think that
I would probably be awkward.
It would be awkward,
Yeah.
right? Unless you had maybe a sister. And then your sister had friends over, and then that's when you would interact with them. But other than that...
But it wouldn't be the same.
It really wouldn't. Off the top of my head, one disadvantage of single-sex schools that I can think of is the fact that students may find it harder to assimilate into a mixed-gender society, okay? So especially if your education consisted only of same-sex schools. This is what me and Sam were talking about, where we would probably find it very awkward, or it wouldn't come natural to us in how to speak to the opposite sex.
Yeah.
We might feel a little bit intimidated because we've never been around them. I mean, girls and boys are really different.
Yeah, and I think like when it's like all girl situation or all boy situation, like people can show like a totally different side of them.
You're right. Yeah. That is very true. So in front of girls, like if you are female and in front of other females, you might feel like, you know, you can be chatty, you can be loud, you can be obnoxious, but in front of the guy, you have to act demure and like gotta look like.
Yeah. So maybe we're missing out this kind of opportunity to show a different side of us.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So we're not showing our true selves. Yeah. Okay. Well, an advantage of an all boys or an all girls school is the fact that actually the curriculum can tailor learning according to the sex of the student.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we do have to be cautious with this because when we're using this type of argument, because although literature says boys and girls learn in different ways, there are people who don't associate with one gender. Okay,
yes.
So we can't assume that because she's a girl, she has to learn in this way. That might not necessarily be true. So this is honestly a very difficult topic to write about, and to debate about, and even to come to a conclusion about. There really are a lot of arguments for and against single-sex schools. Our writing prompt gives us specific instructions on how to break up your paragraphs, but you might still feel a little lost, okay? So let's spend some time thinking of what approach you'd like to take with this composition.
好，今天的这个题目其实很困难，要讨论这个单一性别学校有什么样优点缺点，你是不是支持？那今天呢，我们的文章其实已经有很明确的定义出来这两段，第一段就是优点，第二段就是缺点。那我们还是呢给大家一些方向，我们能来看一下论说文应该要怎么写。那今天这篇论说文，那论说文呢，顾名思义就是要有论跟说，也就是呢你必须要有这个主观的论断跟客观的说明，两个部分都要有，两者缺一不可。OK， 这个才是论说文。那架构方面呢，其实跟你写过的所有文章一样哦，它都是要有这个起承转合。那英文里面呢，我们就分成引言 （introduction）、主体 （body） 跟最后呢你要下的这个结论，也就是 conclusion。 那 introduction 呢，就是文章的引言哦。那全文的主旨句呢，通常在这一部分就要点出来了。主旨句的作用呢，就是要让读者一看呢，开头的第一段就马上知道，你今天这篇文章是要写什么？是在评论餐厅啦，还是你的游记啦 ？OK， 第一段的第一句最好呢，就把它点出来。那以今天这篇论说文来说，开头呢，当然就可以直接讲到我们的主题哦，也就是这个单一性别学校。所以呢，在引言的部分呢，你可以解释什么是单一性别学校，然后呢，说明一下为什么要探讨这个主题哦。那为什么要探讨这个主题的部分呢？你可以说一说一般人或者是专家哦，对于这个主题的看法，或者是呢，你有没有读过一些这个相关的理论的报道啦，甚至是时事，比方说呢，有学生发起联署啦，或者是有报道说越来越多学校不再维持单一性别这种趋势等等呢，这些东西都可以在这个我们的这个第一段引言的部分提出来。那另外一种破题的方法呢，你也可以直接清楚的表达个人的看法，比方说，我支持或者我反对，直接讲清楚，然后后面呢再正反立论来这个剖析。那再来呢，写到这个文章主体的部分呢，这里就是我们主要论说的部分了。那在论说的部分呢，你的这个分析跟你的这个要陈述的论点呢，都必须要讲清楚、说明白。你呢一定要把握重点，要确定立场，不要这个摇摆哦，并且呢要很有条理，要合逻辑。然后呢，今天这个文章有规定哦。但是呢，即使是没有规定，你也应该要这个优缺点都要说明，正反两方呢都有带到，才会显得比较客观。那再来呢，就是我们说的部分了，要讲清楚你支持的立场是哪一边。然后呢，一定要举证，举出实证来支持你的论点。比方说呢，你有读过这个研究报告讲说怎么样，或是呢专家表示怎么样，甚至是呢你个人的经验也可以当作是一种佐证哦，来巩固你的论点。那最后呢，我们 conclusion 呢就是要下结论了。在这边呢，我们可以总结一下前面的要点。强调呢你的立场，或是呢你也可以提出建议。那以今天文章来说呢，已经定义好第一段要讲优点，第二段要讲缺点，所以呢中间呢我们要用这个转折语气的这个连接词就很重要了。这边呢补充一些给大家。那以今天来说呢，第一段讲优点，第二段讲缺点的这种对比的，我们呢就可以用这个 however， 这个是最常用到的，或是呢你可以说这个 nevertheless 或是 whereas 都是这个对比的意思，虽然这样子的一个连接词。那另外呢还有其他很常用的当你要举例的时候，刚刚讲到一定要举例，对不对？举例的时候你就可以说 for example， 或是呢 for instance， 或是呢 take something as an example， 这些呢都是很好用的这个片语。那另外呢，你的这个说明呢要有条列，要有次序，所以呢这边有几个也补充给大家。你可以说这个 for one thing for another， 这个是很常用的，或是 on the one hand on the other hand， 一方面怎么样，另一方面怎么样。那如果你讲完了还要补充说明呢，你可以说 what's more in addition， 讲陈述更多，补充说明。那另外呢，要讲说你的观点的话，你可以讲说 in my opinion， in my view， 就是呢我觉得是这样，我想是这样子。那最后呢下结论的时候，我们可以讲 in conclusion， 或是呢 to sum up， 这些呢都是很常用到的片语咯。
Okay, so now that you've established the approach you'd like to take with your essay, and you've spent some time thinking about this subject, it's time to draw up your outline. The outline will help you organize your ideas into paragraphs. The outline will ensure each paragraph is developed fully and that you've given equal weight to both the pros and cons of same-sex schools. Now let's take a look at the sample outline in the magazine. The first topic sentence introduces the subject. We learned that it says, most of the best schools in Taiwan are single-sex institutions. This sentence almost implies that students learn best in single-sex institutions. Because the top schools are single-sex institutions, right? So if you want to be in a top school and it's a single-sex institution, it sounds like that's probably the best way that students learn. That's what it seems like it's implying. Anyway, that's what the topic sentence sounds like. But the topic sentence is supported by two arguments. It says, some argue that this is better for students' academic achievement. And then it says, they can't be distracted by members of the opposite sex.
好，所以呢在我们的这个范例文章里面呢，我们看到它的大纲哦，作者呢一开头呢就马上先点出来，大部分的这个台湾的前几名的学校都是单一性别的，他呢就先提出这个现况，然后呢用这个现况来破题。 接下来呢，他就提出了几点呢，来这个点出这个优点，来证实这个他前面这个破题的这个句话。他说呢，这个因为呢，有些人会觉得说，这个如果说你在这个学校里面是没有这个异性的话呢，你比较不容易分心。OK， 所以呢，这个也解释了为什么这些学校是比较好。那第二段要讲这个缺点了，我们看一下他第二段怎么写。
Okay, so if the student is following the criteria for this assignment, we can expect an argument against same-sex institutions in this paragraph, right? So the second topic sentence addresses just that. It says, however, school is also supposed to prepare students to participate in society. Okay, this is a very good point. School is supposed to prepare you for the adult world, for the real world.
Yes.
Okay? The writer supports this argument with the following two statements. It says, society is no longer divided into male and female spaces. Believe it or not, this used to be true in the olden days. A long, long time ago, there were places where only females could go, or there were places that only males could go.
Okay.
That's what this sentence is saying. And then B, students at single-sex schools don't learn to interact with people different from them. And that is what me and Sam have been talking about since the beginning, is that one of the disadvantages of single-sex schools is that we don't learn how to interact with the opposite sex.
Yeah, you'll be awkward.
It will be awkward, yes.
好，所以呢，在第二段呢，我们主题句就用刚刚提到的这个连接词 however， 用它来开头带出这个转折。那后半呢，我们的缺点呢，他就提到说，我们刚刚讲到的跟现实社会呢会脱节的这个观点。
Okay, and the essay concludes with the writer's opinion on the matter. It says, it would be better for students and society if schools were no longer single-sex.
最后呢，他下结论呢，就是要用这个作者自己的论点了。他说呢，基于呢不要与现实社会脱节的这个理由呢，他建议应该是要取消单一性别学校咯。
So basically, based on this outline, this writer is writing against single-sex schools, and mainly because it will affect how these students get transition into society. You know, when they have to go out into the adult working world, what's going to happen? How are they going to interact with the opposite sex? Our society is turning into one where that is more accepting, and it's more, we're trying to learn how to coincide with different people, and it's not like we're not all cookie cutter shaped people. We're not just because you're female, you're like this, or just because you're male, you're like this. So a single sex school does seem like one where if they do have it, it seems like we're going backwards in society, right? So this is a very important topic, and I think our two writing samples, actually, both of them agree that we shouldn't have single-sex schools. So we're going to take a quick break before we read through our writing samples, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Okay, so now let's take a minute to read through our basic sample. Basic sample. When many students enter senior high school, they are suddenly stripped of the company of half of their classmates. This is because most of the best schools in Taiwan are single-sex institutions. That is, a school's students are all boys or all girls. Some argue that this is better for the students' academic achievement. Since they can't be distracted by members of the opposite sex, they can focus more intently on schoolwork. However, school is also supposed to prepare students to participate in society. Society is no longer divided into male and female spaces, so why are the nation's best schools? Students miss out on the opportunity to learn how to interact well with people who are different from them. I don't think schools can serve this important purpose when their single-sex organization doesn't reflect society. It would be better for students and better for society if senior high schools were no longer single-sex. Okay, so like we said earlier, most of the top schools in Taiwan are single-sex institutions, which also implies that a school made up of one gender is conducive to the learning process. At least that is what they used to think a long time ago, right? Because most of these schools are probably very old, right?
Yes, yeah.
Are we talking hundreds of years old?
Hundreds? Yeah, kind of. I think so,
Yeah? Okay. Were they mainly the first schools that opened in Taiwan?
Yeah, kind of. I would say, yeah.
Yeah. The truth is there are other factors contributing to this, okay? So I don't think it's necessarily because that they're a single gender school or a single sex school that makes them the top schools in Taiwan.
Yes.
But I can only guess that these are the schools that are the oldest, right? So they have, more prestige.
Yes, prestige. Yes.
They've gained their prestige throughout their years, right? They're like 100-year-old school, so that's why they're a good school. And because they have this prestige, only the best principals, the best teachers, and other supporting staff are hired at the school, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, so it's kind of like because the school already has this reputation, only the best will go to that school. And because of that, there's like this kind of like this vicious cycle, the best go to that school, so all the students all want to get into that school. And because it only accepts good students or the top students, then that school will always be outperforming. Yes, they will always be outperforming other schools. So yeah, with the best resources, the school will only turn out top students. And then it's just, like I said earlier, it just repeats itself. It's just a cycle.
Because they are like top students, so I think it's also more likely for them to be like successful like in the future.
Right.
And it kind of form a kind of like realm or like a hall of fame, and they are like continue to contribute to the school. So like you say, like a cycle,
Right.
Yeah.
I know one of the biggest concerns of parents is the fact that the opposite sex can be distracting,
yes.
right? That is the biggest argument for why we should not have mixed gender schools. That's why a lot of parents, mine included, discourage or even forbid their children from dating. But let's be honest. Guys, come on. How many of you actually waited until you were allowed to date? I'm sure none of your parents were like, oh, go ahead, go start dating when you're in elementary school. I'm sure a lot of them, especially if you come from an Asian background, Chinese background, you have to wait until you graduate university. Wait until you're in university. And then when you're in university, they'll be like, wait until you graduate university.
Yeah, and once you graduate, they'll be like, when are you going to get married?
Yeah, they didn't even give you a chance to date, and then they want you to be married already. So being attracted to other people and dating is a part of growing up. So if anything, I say dating in secret, okay? So dating in secret as in not allowing your parents to know, and also maybe not allowing other students to know, because that student might tell their mom and that mom might tell your mom. You don't want anybody to know, right? I think that's more distracting. Not being allowed to date is more distracting.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and plus you'd only be allowed to hang out at school, right? So if I'm only allowed to hang out with my boyfriend at school because it's a secret, secret, right? Then I probably won't be paying very much attention to what I'm supposed to be doing in school. That's the only time I can spend with my boyfriend, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So for me, I would say that opposite sex is not distracting. Unless you're not allowed to date, then it can be distracting.
Yeah, I think this point of view is also like it can also associate with the idea of like participating in real society.
Yes.
Because it's not like you graduate from high school and then you no longer will have crush on anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in a way, it's also like prepare you for the real society.
Yeah. Okay, so before we read our advanced sample, Sam, you want to go through some of the words in there because it's a little bit complicated.
Yes.
Okay.
好，我们在看一下这个advanced sample 之前呢，先补充一些单字。那今天我们一直讲到这个单一性别学校啊，今天呢我们就看到我们可以讲说这个 same sex 或是 single sex 单一性别的，或是呢你也可以说 gender separated，OK 是性别是分开来的。那学校的话呢，你可以讲 institution 机构 organization， 或是呢 school 这个字就可以了。那男女合校的话呢，我们就会说 mixed 或是呢 co-ed，OK 就表示是合在一起的。那异性的话呢，我们怎么讲？我们会说 the opposite sex，OK 就是相对于你的性别的人。那性别刻板印象的话，比方说觉得说啊，女生一定要留长发，男生一定要会这个运动啦，这种呢就叫做 gender stereotypes。OK，stereotypes 就是刻板印象。那呢，另外我们有看到说，刚刚有讲到的这个跨性别的 transgender 跟这个非二元性别的 non-binary， 在我们的等一下的文章里面都会看到这些单字咯。
Okay, so now let's take a look at our advanced sample. Advanced sample.Gender segregated schooling has been in place in Taiwan for decades, especially in senior high schools. While not all schools are separated by gender, many such schools still exist, and there are many people who support the idea. There are some potential benefits to this practice. It's believed that by separating girls and boys during their hormonal teenage years, they're less distracted and better able to focus on their studies. The practice might also prevent children from conforming to certain overt gender stereotypes, as they aren't put in situations where they compare how they should behave as boys or as girls. However, in today's society, there are some disadvantages to gender-separated schools. For one thing, an environment in which you only encounter people of your own gender doesn't mirror the real world, where people of all genders interact constantly. This could lead to students having a hard time adjusting after they graduate. For another, not every child fits neatly into a gender category. Transgender and non-binary students might find it very stressful if they're in an environment that's wrong for them. Besides these factors, studies haven't found conclusive proof of gender segregation being beneficial in schools. I personally think it's best if we just do away with the practice and make all schools co-ed. Okay, so in this writing sample, it seems like the argument is again the same, Gender segregated schooling is good because you won't be distracted, especially when you're hormonal. Hormonal, if you guys don't know what this word is, it's basically the time when your body hormones are these chemicals that your body produces, and there's a lot of hormone changes that goes on when you're a teenager, when you're in senior high school. It's called puberty.
Yes.
Puberty, puberty. And your hormones are responsible for these changes. So this is the time when you're all moody and your body's going through a whole bunch of changes. And that's when parents and I guess the rest of society in the olden days thought that this was not a good time for you to be mixing with the opposite sex. This article also talks about overt gender stereotypes, okay? So overt gender stereotypes meaning that you would be forced to act like a girl or be forced to act like a boy.
Mm-hmm.
The argument here is that you wouldn't be forced to act like a girl or a guy if you're in same-sex schools, right?
But I think
it feels
more
like,
likely.
Yeah, it's more likely to happen. So I'm a little bit confused by this argument. Because remember we said that the curriculum, what you learn in school, will be catered to that learning style.
Yeah.
So if you're a girl, you would be catered, the learning style would be catered to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in this type of situation, there would be more stereotypes that you would have to follow. Right?
Yeah, especially when during teenage years, it's a time you want to be like everyone, but you want to be different.
Yeah.
You're stuck in there, and if you're in same-sex school, you probably want to be like everyone else.
Right. And I think the strongest argument that this writer has and concluded this writing sample with is this, which is there is no conclusive proof of the benefits of same-sex schools. Mm-hmm. And I feel like because of that, we rest our case. Same-sex schools are not beneficial because there's not enough information to say that it is.
Yeah.
So that's my conclusion.
Yeah.
Is that your conclusion, Sam?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. We've run out of time for this episode, but hopefully it was a very interesting one. I think it was very interesting to discuss this. And hopefully in the future, we won't see any more same-sex schools in Taiwan, I guess, and across the world as well.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Angeline signing off.
This is Sam.
Goodbye.
Bye.